typical homesteading witch here. I wanted to go ahead and show you guys some of the newest seedlings that I've got going right now. I'm living in South Central Texas. We're blessed to have 2 growing seasons here, which is awesome. A lot of places that are further up north, they get their first frost of the year a lot sooner than we do, and it really severely limits the amount of time that they can garden. Well, it's not so here in Texas. We can grow things from around February, March onto June, July, and then do another run late summer, early fall, all the way up till the first frost date. This is my first year implementing a fall garden. It is a relatively new concept to me, just because I have recently broadened the types of vegetables I'm growing, and in the past the types of vegetables I grew were specifically grown in spring and summer. So now I've kind of moved on to some new plants, specifically the cruciferous family. Brassicas and cruciferous are your plants like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, things like that. And they typically do a lot better in the cooler months. And some places even grow them as long as January 1st. I've actually seen people harvest their cauliflower and their broccoli to have for Yule or Christmas, which is awesome. When I learned about fall gardening, you know I had to join in on the fun. So today I'm going to show you guys some of the things that I'm currently growing. It is a little bit past the middle of July, so I have some seedlings that I've started indoors. I'm going to keep them in here for at least a month, maybe a month and a half, to the end of August, early September, when it really begins to cool down. And when it begins to cool down, I'll transplant them out into the garden. All right, witchy friends. These are some of the seedlings that I have planted. I've got some winter squash, some broccoli, cauliflower. These tomatoes right here actually get between 1 pound and 2 pounds. They're freaking huge. Garden beans, short and sweet carrots, romaine lettuce, sweet peas, rainbow carrots, Danver carrots, which are actually a lot larger than the short and sweet. They're pretty long, about 7 inches. Radishes, sweet peas, and beets. Today I just got some of the carrots, some more cauliflower into this little planter. I needed to go get some more potting soil, and so those kind of came as my second wave. About a week or 2 ago, I planted these guys. These guys are radishes, beets, cauliflower, snap peas, winter squash, and mostly carrots. Those front little ones, those are carrots. Now, carrots are super meticulous, and so the reason that I started some more carrots in this one is because I wanted to get that potting soil. If you can tell the difference between the soil, this one has a lot less big chunks than this one. The one to the left has a lot of big chunks of what looks like mulch or bark, something like that, which is great for planting in the ground, and it's also great for starting a lot of seeds. The thing with carrots is they do not like any obstructions in the soil when they're growing. If they hit a rock or a big chunk of bark like that, it can cause a fork in the root, which is unfavorable. I think they would probably still be edible, but I think it does affect the flavor, and it certainly affects the way that they look. So I went ahead and planted all of these. I'm going to continue to succession plant because some of these, like my your root vegetables, your carrots, your radishes, your beets, things like that, you know, you continuously plant those, and I've talked about that before. So planting them in 2-week succession, by the time you have one group ready to harvest, their first ones that you planted, you've already got second ones growing. So you continuously have a supply. If you don't do it that way, you just plant them all at once and you just do one big long haul, then you're going to have one really large harvest all at once. And I mean, that's great if you want to preserve those things, if you want to maybe pickle a lot of beets, things like that. But I want to continuously have a food supply. So succession planting was the route for me. Another thing about these, a lot of them have a pretty short span in terms of when they mature. Okay, so this one, days to harvest, 58 to 65. So in roughly 2 months' time, these will be ready to go. We'll be eating these. So since it's the middle of July now, towards the end of July, I'll be eating those in about the middle of September, which is pretty great. Same thing goes with the garden peas. These are pretty short too, 60 to 65. Now some of the other ones take a little bit longer, 85 days. I'm trying to remember, it might be the cauliflowers. Those are 60 to 70, so we get those in 2 months, maybe a little bit over 2 months. Oh yeah, 50 to 85. And this is our broccoli. It's a pretty big jump. That's over a month difference. So I guess it kind of depends on the climate that you're growing in. What I did today to make sure I'd be good to plant all of these, obviously 85 days to harvest for that guy. So what I did to make sure I was good on starting these seeds and that my timing was correct is I looked up the first day of frost for my area. Simple Google search, and I got that idea from a video I watched on Roots and Refuge. I love their channel. If you haven't looked into their stuff, it's great. Anyways, so the suggestion was to go ahead, look at the first frost date of the year for your region, and then count back how many days you have. I have about 104 days until my very first frost. So that's a lot of time to get these guys going. I'm actually gonna order some more of these little cardboard things in bulk. I'm gonna have to order them off Amazon because gardening isn't as popular in the fall as it is in spring and summer. I couldn't find those anywhere. These are just some leftover ones I had from February when I initially started my seedlings. And I had an inkling that I was gonna be starting a second run, and here we are. So now that I've got my seedlings planted, the next step of this process is to start amending my soil. And I'll show you guys a little bit of that too. I'm actually just waiting for it to cool down a little bit outside. It's still the heat of the day. It's about 5 o'clock here. So it's over 95 degrees and the sun's really bearing down on the garden area. And I want to be as safe as possible. I've lathered myself in sunscreen, and I will wait till it cools down a little bit, put some of my all natural mosquito repellent on, and then go out there and start digging some holes into the empty spaces in my garden and just kind of flipping them over and then adding some fertilizer in there. Starting to amend them, putting compost in there, getting it nutrient filled. Hey guys, so I'm ready to get started on amending some of the soil in the spaces of the garden that I'm going to be planting my new stuff. And I kind of just wanted to show y'all some of the spots that I'm going to be planting my new things. They're now empty spots. There were things there that were growing there that ran their course of life, and so now that spot is empty. I had two big squash plants right here, two yellow squash, one really huge one there. So now this area is going to be designated for cauliflower and probably radishes or carrots. If you can see over here, and you're going to have to excuse the mess. My chickens, if you saw my video previous to this, my little chickens have been in here and they have made a huge mess. So I pulled one of my tomato plants that was right there on the end. It had completely died when I snapped off the branches. It was dead inside. There was no point of holding out hope. Now these guys right here, even though they have a lot of brown leaves, I really think that they're going to start producing again. This one's actually still producing. It's just not producing very much, not producing very often, and the quality of fruit isn't that great. That's because of this heat. This is Texas, and we've been experiencing heat waves of over 103 degrees this past week, so everything's a little bit depleted and beaten down. That being said, it's prime time to get these little spots ready for some new plants. One of the first things that I'm going to do out here is I'm going to take this trusty shovel and this hoe, and I'm just going to turn over the ground right here in these empty spots to kind of get the nutrients flowing. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some compost in there, and I'm also going to add some bone meal in there. These beds aren't too terribly deep. They do lay directly on top of the ground of the grass that's underneath it. But we pulled out all the grass. We pulled out all the grass and we put these raised beds in. And when we did that, we added in some compost. We put some really good soil in. We put some fertilizer in. But that was back in the beginning of the year. And since then, the squash plants that have been here have used all those nutrients up. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it nice and fertile for the incoming plants. Now that I've moved the ground up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and go get some compost out of my compost bin. I've got a dual compost bin that I use that rotates, that I use for my more composted materials, and then I also have a DIY trash can composter that I use, and the DIY trash can composter is the first place I put my compost. So I put food scraps, coffee grounds, old newspaper, nothing with gloss on it, I also put, when I clean out my chicken coop, I put the hay and straw and chicken droppings in there, and it makes for a really, really nice compost. Everything starts out in the DIY composter, and then once that gets filled up, it makes its way over to the dual composter. And the dual composter has already what's been in the DIY composter, and I am able to rotate it and to more efficiently compost it there. So it usually takes a couple of months for everything to get all said and done, but it makes for some really nice compost mix. These are my compost bins that I was telling you about. This is my DIY one. My husband helped me make it out of a 32-ounce trash can. You see it's got holes in the top. It's got holes drilled running all the way down. It has holes on the bottom, and it stands up on a cinder block. So this is where everything goes like immediately. So I just cleaned out my chicken coop, so that goes in there. Now, once that gets full, it'll be time for it to go over here to the dual composter. The dual composter, this side is a little bit more along in the process, further along. See if you can see that. I added some water to it today, but it's pretty good. It's ready to roll. At least will do the trick for getting our soil amended. Alright guys, here's the compost, if you can see it. And it's pretty broken down. Got some leaves, got some old food scraps, all of that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in that spot, kind of mix it all in real good, and that's how I'm amending my soil for my fall garden. I may also add some bone meal in, which I mentioned to you earlier. I might wait a little bit to do that till I get a little bit closer to putting the plants in the ground. The more I thought about it, the more I thought that I want those nutrients to be fresh so that the new plants can use them. So for now, I'm just going to do the compost, and then in a couple months, about 8 weeks, give or take, maybe 6 weeks, when I transplant those seedlings, I'll go ahead and add some bone meal too. And I'll do a short video on that at that time. As always, be blessed, witchy boos, and happy gardening, and happy witching, and happy homesteading.